Training camp is finally here, and Jake is back at his home away from home. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Colts is brought to you by eBay Motors. A championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. So for parts that fit, head to eBay Motors and look for that green check. Stay in the game with eBay Guaranteed Fit. ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I am Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at horseshoehuddle.com and the Locked On Colts podcast. And joining me today is the always affable and sometimes overworked Jake Arthur, your resident boots on the ground there at Colts training camp. Now, we are switching roles a little bit for training camp. I'll be doing more of the hosting of the show, while Jake will be our resident expert because he, again, will be the boots on the ground there. So to kind of kick off today's show, because it's the first day of training camp, we're going to talk about some news and notes, things that went on in terms of like injury processes and stuff like that. And then Jake will be able to dive into some of the conversations he had with Chris Ballard and with some of the players that hit the podium today. But starting with some news and notes, and Kenny here has the right idea in our comment section. Shaquille Leonard was not among the group of players that was placed on the physically unable to perform list. Now, this doesn't mean we're in the clear with Shaquille Leonard. Chris Ballard did say that it will be a slow process for him, and he's not going to get out there to full contact or anything like that from day one. But this is pretty good news, Jake. I mean, I think you and I both kind of expected him to start on the PUP list because it was kind of pointing that way, you know?
Yeah, Kenny makes a great point. It was a really solemn episode we had recently because everyone's non-committal comments, really seem to lean more toward we don't know when he's coming back. And they could have easily placed him on PUP to start because you could take anyone off of PUP, any day, Mm-hmm. But the fact that he's not starting on it and they're going to allow him to practice and just like gradually ramp up his usage from there, that's terrific news because it indicates that he's going to be a full participant in training camp at some point. Yeah. So still, even talking like Zaire Franklin today, for example, he was non-committal on it. So it does sound like maybe he's just going to maybe do some individual stuff to start out. But shoot, it's great news that he's not going to be involved in the PUP list to start things out.
Yeah. And to kind of give some more background on the PUP list, kind of like what you were saying there, Jake, the PUP list is the physically unable to perform list. It's essentially a list for players where coming into camp, they're just not ready to practice. They don't count towards like your camp roster that you have. And you can activate them at any time. But once you activate them, they become part of your roster again. If you choose not to activate them by the end of camp, I believe they miss the first 6 weeks of the season at a minimum. And then if you don't activate them at that 6-week window, they are out for the rest of the season. I believe that's still how it goes. I know they changed a lot with the COVID thing that happened a couple years ago, but that's the best of my knowledge on the PUP list. So him not being on there is a pretty good sign. 2 players were placed on the physically unable to perform list, or they're going to be. I don't think we've had the official mentioning of them yet, but Tyquan Lewis, who's still recovering from a major injury, his second major injury on the same type of injury, I think on a different leg. He's coming back from that. And then tight end Will Mallory, the 6th round pick out of Miami, he's going to start on the physically unable to perform list as well. But Chris Ballard kind of said that, he should be back in a couple of days. Like they're just kind of being safe with that. So 2 players on the PUP list, Jake. I mean, honestly, I just saw the Giants update where they had like 8 guys go on there. I'm feeling pretty good with just 2 of them going on there for the Colts.
No, I came away from Ballard's media availability feeling pretty optimistic about injuries. Now, when they do officially reveal their PUP list or like NFI guys, it might be more than just those 2. Ballard said they were still working through physicals and things like that because everyone does have to pass a physical to determine whether or not they're going to be included on one of those lists. But overall, they hit on all the major guys. Michael Pittman is back. Jelani Woods is back. Guys that missed a big chunk of the offseason, they all either have been explained away and it sounds optimistic, or they, weren't included on this, pair of guys who were expected to miss time. But like you said, Will Mallory and Tyquan Lewis, it sounds like both of them, it's just a quick matter of time until they're out there. And for Lewis, that's like a medical marvel because, again, we've talked about it. Like the patellar injury has been studied and mentioned as the most difficult injury for an NFL player to come back from. And it's now happened to him in consecutive years in opposite knees. So he was back to start last year's training camp and probably had his best summer. So I'm pretty optimistic for Lewis. The team still counts on him being a key member of that defensive line rotation.
Yep. And then two players who will not be placed on the PUP list as well. Two guys that could have been on there, that we just didn't know coming up. Drew Ogletree, the tight end, who had a phenomenal summer last year. He's not going to be on the PUP list. And then Juju Brents, the cornerback they took in the second round, who was limited throughout all of the spring stuff. It looks like he will be coming into camp on a fresh start. Again, a little limited, but he won't be on that PUP list. The other big news and notes that we need to mention is Ian Rappaport tweeted out about Jonathan Taylor not showing up to Colts camp. And for a good 20 to 25 minutes, there was a frenzy among the Colts nation, everyone going, oh my gosh, Jonathan Taylor's holding out with a whole year left on his contract. He's going to get fined more than what his rookie deal is even worth at this point. Like, what are we doing? Like, do we have to extend him right now? And then 25 minutes later, he showed up. There was the Colts released a photo that he was one of the guys who showed up. So I don't know if it was a 25-minute holdout or Ian Rappaport got some bad sources on that there. But yes, Jonathan Taylor did show up to camp. If it was a 25-minute holdout, I guess his point was made. It was very, he stood in solidarity with the other running backs for a good 25 minutes there.
Yeah, very short-lived, right? And honestly, I think everyone's report deadline was like 10 a.m. I think he was there.
Yeah.
I'm guessing Rapp just didn't get word yet that he was there. But Ballard was asked about it too. That no one mentioned anything about him not being there on time or whatever. So he's, all his comments this offseason have been really, surprising because he's always towed the company line and coach speak and things like this. Mm-hmm. And so it was going to be super uncharacteristic for him to hold out, I think. I'm really not surprised that he's there. He can be disgruntled all he wants, but even Kenny Moore, who was disgruntled with his contract last summer, showed up on time. A lot of Colts players just don't, hold out. And these guys have a lot of trust in Chris Ballard as well. Chris said that he had a lot of conversations with Jonathan in May and June, and I think they were even, set to speak again today. So, Chris has these guys' trust. He has their ear. He may be unhappy with his contract, but they'll get something figured out at some point, one way or another.
Yeah, and another thing with that too is I believe that the fines are compounding now when it comes to missing training camp.
It's rough. It's expensive to not be there.
Yeah, so for a player like Jonathan Taylor, who's on that rookie deal and a second-round rookie deal, nonetheless, I think by like week 3 or 4 of training camp, if he were to miss all of those there, he would already be fined more than what his contract is worth. Like
literally just there so he doesn't get fined.
yeah, which we saw with Kenny Moore last year. He was kind of doing like a hold in the first couple of days. It was a couple of days where he was showing up, but he wasn't actually practicing. So we could have seen a situation like that, but I just don't see that coming to fruition with Jonathan Taylor. Like, yes, he's frustrated. Yes, he wants a big deal like all these players do, and he's worth a big deal. He's a really good player. But I don't see it coming to a head like it is with, it's a very different situation than the Josh Jacobs situation in Vegas, where it makes sense for him to hold out. It makes sense there. It doesn't really make too much sense for Jonathan Taylor to hold out with a whole year left on his contract.
Yeah, I don't really think it benefits him because it's a new coaching staff coming in. Like you're expected to be a leader. You have to get used to how things are going to go with the new coaches, with the new offense, new quarterbacks. Like, it really doesn't help. Plus, he's probably not going to get any carries in the preseason. Like, every rep is going to matter for him. So it does not benefit him much not to show up.
Yep. So guys, we've got the news and notes out of the way. Now we're going to transition over to Jake's specialty. But first, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes in life, we're faced with tough choices and the path forward isn't always clear. I don't know if I've actually talked about this too much on the show, but I am a loud and proud college dropout. So if we're talking about, tough choices and the path not always clear, I dropped out of college after a year and kind of redirected my whole life to get to where I am now and all that stuff. So, whether you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy is always there to help you stay connected with what you really want in life while you navigate it. So you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. Again, when I left college and again was redirecting my entire life, I relied on therapy a lot. I relied on therapy for a good while, dealing with the ramifications of my decision and all that stuff. And I didn't go through BetterHelp, but I went through my own therapist. And BetterHelp is just a way to connect you with a therapist to help you with those things. It's not this negative stigma that a lot of people make it out to be. It's a nice little crutch when you need it. That's what I've used it for a couple times in my life. And especially at that time when my entire future life was very much redirected. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/locked today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/locked on. And every day, again, we're going to be going live at 4:30-ish every single day throughout Colts training camp to talk about everything that's going on. Days that we have practices, we're going to have a very set schedule with how we do the show. We're going to let you guys know on those days. It can be really fun. And again, all you wonderful everydayers, 4:30 on the Colts YouTube channel, we're going to be going live to talk everything Indianapolis Colts. All right, Jake. So this is where I start pushing the show over to you and have you carry the whole load for me. So I'm excited. I could take a little break, get a little bit of my drink here. I'm feeling good. You guys talked with Chris Ballard today, the first time in a while. I think the first time since draft night, I believe. Right, Jake?
Yeah, I think so. It's been the first time since, Isaiah Rodgers and all the draft stuff. So yeah, this was the first time in a while. And there was, a lot of important things we needed to talk to him about.
Right. So what are some newsworthy things that Chris Ballard talked about? What are some things that you jotted down your notes or you highlighted and starred and bolded and you were like, ooh, I need to write some articles about? What were some big things that Chris Ballard said today?
Yeah, so the most burning topics, I guess you could say, we'll start with the quarterback competition. It seems like, things will probably go pretty similarly to how they did in the spring. My guess is, Gardner Minshew takes the first half of the practice, first team reps. Richardson fills in afterward. But Chris Ballard he said a lot without saying a lot when it comes to like when they'll determine Richardson is ready to be the starter, because that is the plan at some point, So they said basically they'll have some internal discussions as to what criteria he needs to meet essentially for them to determine when he's going to be the starter. The coaches will ultimately make that decision. I'm sure Shane Steichen in the quarterback room, that'll be how it comes up. But Gardner Minshew, they're pretty comfortable and happy with him right now. He views this as his job, but he's still also like being a great teammate and helping Richardson where he can and such. But Richardson, they're not going to rush it. As we've assumed all offseason, they'll get him out there when he's ready. Now, something I have assumed is that regardless if he's the starter, there will be a package of plays for him, because they've always said, especially with his lack of experience in college, you learn by playing, basically, But Ballard didn't really acknowledge that they were going to do that. He was asked about it, but, he's basically said, we'll figure something out. Like, that'll be up to Shane, so on and so forth. So the quarterback competition, there wasn't a lot of light shined on it, but we kind of know that Richardson's not going to be the guy to start things out.
Yeah. Kind of what we've been saying throughout this whole offseason leading up to this point is it's not Anthony Richardson versus Gardner Minshew. it's Anthony Richardson versus Anthony Richardson.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
and I did see some comments from Chris Ballard where he was like, you know, we'll determine throughout all of August if he's going to be ready by the end of it. So he's kind of hinting at what we've all been saying, which is it's all Anthony Richardson. You know, that's really all that matters here. If Gardner Minshew comes out and looks like Joe Montana in practice, you know, you obviously want to get him on the field, but if Richardson's showing those improvements and he looks ready to go week 1, it doesn't matter what Gardner Minshew does throughout this training camp because it's all about Anthony Richardson. Pivoting from the quarterback position, though, talking offensive line. I know you guys kind of grilled him a little bit about offensive line. There were a couple questions in there about it, which rightfully so. I mean, they kind of repeated the mistake of last year while not adding too much depth to the group, but Ballard sounded pretty confident in this O-line group, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, we can't say if it was definitely a mistake last year, but we can't say if it's a mistake yet for this year, but they're taking the same steps, the starting 5, they're going into it without much turnover. These guys didn't really get anyone added to the mix to threaten their position as starters. The depth is super questionable and unknown. You look across the whole offensive line and really Danny Pinter is just about the only guy you're confident in as a backup, and that's only at center. But, Ballard pointed to basically the second half of last year, and he said, we're moving forward with these guys because we've seen them. Last year they did a really nice job. They got better. He pointed to Bernhard Raimann's development specifically. And they're really happy where he is at currently. They expect him to continue ascending. So basically they, the back half of last season was enough of for them to determine they're confident in this group. And yes, you and I have questioned them not really adding anything to the group. And I think rightfully so, because I mean, these guys still have to go out there and if any of those starters get hurt, it could put them in a world of trouble. So they're confident in it. We'll see. I mean, you loved yesterday's show when I said last year's group stinks, and now I'm going to hold them to a different standard in camp. Yeah, I've got to see it to believe it, and I'm still not sold on the depth. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I will say keep an eye on Jake Witt, but it will be interesting to see. I know Ballard did speak highly about Bernhard Raimann. Did he say anything about Will Fries at right guard, though, or anything particularly there at right guard?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't go into it deep, but he said, Will Fries essentially in a roundabout way earned the right to still be the right guard, and he grew in his own right. So again, they're always confident in Nelson, Kelly, and Smith, but they think Raimann and Fries earned that right and both got a lot better. And he even threw the 3 veterans in there that they think everyone is going to raise their game. I just think they view last year as just some random fluky year. And that's a little troubling because in the NFL, you should be graded on what you most recently produced. So it's pretty risky, but that's what they're willing to go with.
We'll see. Now going to another position where they're going a little bit risky. Chris Ballard did mention at cornerback that they are deciding to go young. They kind of decided, I think they said in like the winter time or something, or in the draft season, they decided they wanted to go young at the cornerback position. Now to put some context to what Ballard said here, 44% of the Colts cornerback room are rookies right now. There's only 3 players out of the 9 on the roster who have more than 2 years of playing experience in the NFL. So Chris Ballard was not mincing his words when he said they wanted to go young because they're going super, super young at the cornerback position.
Yeah, and even, with Isaiah Rodgers and that whole situation, they didn't know about that before the draft, but they were determined to go young anyways. And Ballard basically pointed at 2018 when they got the new, everyone in knew Kenny Moore and the whole group. They looked at that as a reason to go young again. They traded off Stephon Gilmore. He wanted to go to a contender. Isaiah Rodgers is someone, they liked, but I don't know they were ever sold he was going to be one of those guys they could constantly have in the starting lineup. Obviously, Brandon Faison didn't work out. Dallas Flowers, again, they like him, but you can't hang your hat on one undrafted free agent that you like. So they determined to go young right after the season, and shoot, they did it. Ballard said, we drafted 3 of them for a reason. And again, they all seem like perfect glove fits for Gus Bradley's scheme.
Yep. So we shall see what those guys do. Now, coming up, guys, we're going to keep this apropos of fun and talking Colts training camp with some player comments that Jake was able to sit on today. All right, Jake, so you talked to a couple players today. I'm not going to list off every single one of them, but you can go with the most important ones that you think were really caught your eye here. So which players really said some interesting, some fun things, anything crazy that was said today, or mostly kind of by the book with all these guys?
Yeah, so whenever guys are going to work out together in that downtime, the lull in between veteran OTAs and training camp, especially when there's rookies involved, you want to hear about it. And Michael Pittman was the first guy we talked to today. And he's got his own contract situation, mind you, but he's totally like, it'll work itself out. He's like not worried about it at all. But, he talked about all the guys getting together in the offseason. I guess like the vast majority of the offensive skill position guys went down there with all 3 quarterbacks to Miami: Gardner Minshew, Anthony Richardson, and Sam Ehlinger. And they just kind of had a boys hang for however long they were down there. They basically simulated what it was like being in the building, and then they just kind of hung out and went to dinner and did activities and went fishing and stuff afterward. Pittman had a lot of really good things to say about Anthony Richardson. This guy, he's an athletic freak and everything like that, but his want to get better and his total immersion into the program and the playbook and perfecting his craft, he just more and more seems like the perfect guy that they would have wanted. He's everything they described they wanted before the draft. And, Pittman said, I've even had to say like, hey, Ant, like a couple times, like to get him out of his playbook and to like pay attention to him and whatever. And, reassure him, like you're our friend. You're not just our quarterback, like just, be one of us. You don't have to be so immersed in, the football side of it. Like just hang and be one of the guys, So he's making a really strong impression with his work ethic and everything. So that was really great to see. Alec Pierce, talked about that a lot as well. He kind of got into the finer details of why it's important for the pass catchers and the quarterbacks to get together. I know you had a conversation with him recently, but he just got into the thing of, we have different size receivers, we have guys with different arm strength. So a 6'4" receiver is going to require a different pass on the same route than a guy who's 5'10", 5'11". So all these guys got together. It sounds like they got some really good work. They did film study, they simulated a practice and stuff, did some routes on air and things like that. So it sounds like those guys really got a lot out of their time together. Plus, when you do that without coaches and everyone around, it builds chemistry and bonding and everything like that. That's sappy stuff that I really like to hear during the offseason. I'm really into that stuff.
Yeah, you're into the sappy stuff. We know. Yeah. You're watching rom-coms when you're not there and really getting into stuff like The Notebook.
Hey,
and
I've been married for 10 years and the same woman for 15. I'm mince no words. I am into rom-coms and all that good stuff.
There you go. Now, not to toot my own horn here, me add some stuff, but you mentioned, I talked to Alec Pierce this past week. So if you guys haven't read that article over on horseshoehello.com, I wrote a whole long story piece on Alec Pierce. Go over there, check it out. But I did kind of joke around with Alec during our conversation because he was telling me that they were all down in Florida, working out and stuff like that, which I'm glad it all came to light today. I don't know if that was known beforehand. I would have actually reported it if it wasn't, but I didn't even realize. But I did kind of joke around with Alec Pierce before we started our conversation. And I was like, hey, did you guys do a race down there? Did you guys see who was faster than Anthony Richardson? Like, see if the quarterback could beat you guys all in a race? He's like, no, but it would have been pretty close. He could move. He was like, you could see it down there. You could see the arm. You could see the athleticism. So it is really good. These guys are all getting together. I know that you put down the notes here that Alec Pierce did mention getting more comfortable going into this season. That's something he did reiterate to me quite a bit because I don't think people realize this too much because it's such an under talked about thing is the rookie season for an NFL player is so grueling because you go from finishing up your 12, 13, 14, 15 game college season, whatever it is, depending on how far you go, you're finishing up this college season. and you're shifting gears immediately into training for the combine. And then the second you're done training for the combine, you are training for that pro day. You're still training for that pro day. Then the pro day happens, and then you go right into spring camp. You're learning a whole new playbook. You're doing all that stuff. Then you're right into training camp. You have like little bits of time off in between there. But then you go right into the season, the longest season you've probably ever played in your entire career of 17 plus games. It's a lot for a rookie. And that's where you saw like a player like Alec Pierce hit that rookie wall around week 12, week 13. He kind of just really ran out of gas. We've seen this with other players too with the Colts. We saw it with Michael Pittman Jr. in his rookie season. So to hear Alec Pierce talk about his comfort level and also be a guy for Anthony Richardson being like, hey man, I know you're going to hit the wall at some point because we all do. Like I was able to, work my way through it and still do some things later in the season. Like be ready for it though. I think that's such a good thing to have for your young quarterback there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just super important. And again, this is such a young team. They've got such a good mix of like really young key players, but some veterans like DeForest Buckner, Zaire Franklin that have been there. He's got a really strong support system. So, that's really good to see. I just mentioned Franklin and Buck. They spoke today as well. They're really excited about year 2 under Gus Bradley. And Buckner specifically talked about the potential of this defensive line. And it's something I'm going to write about here in a little bit, actually. But this defensive line is just really, really deep now. Like we've had years where the ends are kind of stocked or the tackles are, but rarely has the whole group been pretty deep. So they're pretty excited about it. And Buckner singled out Dayo Odengbo first. Ken, and I know you're watching. So he singled out Dayo Odengbo first and mentioned, this guy really came along at the end of last season and he's picked up where he left off all off season. Like he looks awesome. And, he said a healthy Kwity Paye is going to be, a huge boost for the team, big problem for opposing offenses. So they're really pumped to get things going. And I think you and I can both agree they might be a little more complete up front than they were last year. And that's with a defense that was already really good for the majority of the season.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm excited about all of these guys this next season, especially on the defensive line. And I always love hearing from Franklin and Buckner because whatever you want to say about the Colts culture last year and kind of how it all went awry and who were the real leaders in this locker room and stuff, like those two have been consistent leaders for a couple of years now. Like those are the two guys. Obviously Shaquille Leonard when he's out there as well, but those are the two guys that everybody looks to when they talk. Zaire Franklin's been leading so many of their off the field movements, in the last like 4 or 5 years, obviously with him being here. And then DeForest Buckner is obviously that veteran in the room who's been to a Super Bowl, who has done a lot of right things in his career. So it's always great hearing those guys talk leadership and expectations and all that stuff there. I think that's all we really have for today in terms of players talking. We did have a couple comments and stuff here that there was one I wanted to throw up here. Was there an update that we just got that is Jonathan Taylor on the PUP list?
Let's see.
While you looked it up, I'll just keep talking a little bit.
Yes, he is. Taylor is going on the PUP list with the ankle. But again, he can come up at any time. Like he might get cleared tomorrow. You never know.
Okay. Well, that's a new update here for all you guys tuning in. Thank you, LOL, MLL,
Bob Dunk.
Bob Dunk. Appreciate the update there. I go on airplane mode when we're recording, so I didn't get the update. But Jonathan Taylor on the PUP list with the ankle injury. We'll see how long it is. Like we said at the very top of the show, the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, you are on that. You don't really count as a roster spot until you are taken off of that PUP list. And you are out. You cannot practice. You cannot do anything on the field until you are off that list there. But once he is activated, he's good to go. If the Colts do not activate him by the end of training camp, then he's out the first 6 weeks. And if those 6 weeks are up and he's still not ready to go, then he's going to miss the entire season. But that is a little, that's far out in the future. We have until the end of August to worry about all that. And the benefit of having a player like Jonathan Taylor on that list is you're never really worried about him getting up to speed. It's not like a rookie where it's like, oh no, like how is he going to adjust to practice? This is a guy who's been in the NFL for a couple of years. So, it's something to monitor. And Dustin, we don't want to speculate too much on this aspect right here that you're putting unable or unwilling. Yes, it is a weird, it's difficult timing with all the conversations about about running back usage and running back pay and stuff. So we'll have to keep it monitored on there. But I'd be shocked if it's him. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I just don't know. With all of it. So he is on the PUP list.
Mhm.
That's all we can really say right now. And hopefully he's, good to go by the end of August and he's on the field for the Colts this year.
Yeah, and it could be one of those things like Ballard discussed with a handful of other guys. They were out all off season and they just don't want to throw them out there full go quite yet. It could be something where, they want to see him being Jonathan Taylor or, look like he hasn't been off all off season essentially before they go. And again, it's day to day. Like,
yeah.
I'm not worried about it yet.
There's no rush until the end of August. Now for, August 25th and he's still on the PUP list. Okay. I'll be concerned then, guys. But as of right now, we're going to keep with the daily content. We'll keep you updated on this situation. And if we get more news or actual news on it, rather than us just speculating, then we'll do that. But all you beautiful everydayers, come back here 4:30 every single day. We'll have Jake's analysis on practice and player interviews and everything going on. And Jake will also be posting a lot of clips from these player interviews. So you guys can check that out on our YouTube channel. See those little quick conversations that he had with some of the players. And if you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on X. Also, subscribe to Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube, where we listen to your podcast. We'd love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll see you guys in the afternoon, bright and early, tomorrow.